I decided to do my research over the effectiveness of changing colors in the classroom. A few months ago, I read a blog post on forms of public behavior charts and how this type of public shaming, as she called it, can be damaging to students. The author of the article, Pernell Ripp, stated that she had used public behavior charts in her classroom in the past, up until she realized that she was creating a divided classroom by doing so. She had a group of good kids and a group of so-called bad kids. Her students would go home each night and tell their parents who the bad kids were that day, and eventually the parents began making comments to her about how they just can't understand how she could teach so-and-so and how that must be so difficult for her. This prompted my research into the matter of changing colors and other forms of public behavior charts in the elementary school classrooms. I began my research at Hallsville East Elementary with my mentor teacher, Nikki Thomas, and a class of 20 first grade students. The district policy in Hallsville is for teachers to use a color-changing clipboard. We have where all of our students start out on green at the beginning of the day, which means that they are ready to learn. If the student has what they call a super bobcat day and goes above and beyond, they are moved to purple. If a teacher has to give a student several warnings, they are moved to yellow. If there are more infractions afterwards, they're moved to orange, and if they have a really bad day, they get moved to red. So I began my student teaching with following the district's policies on changing the colors. So sometimes I'd have to change their colors to yellow, sometimes I'd change them to purple, but for the first 4 weeks I stuck with the district policy. After 4 weeks, I decided that I would try using only positive behavior reinforcement. Because I had to follow the district policy, I still changed their colors, but I only changed colors to purple. I didn't change any kids' colors to yellow, orange, or red. And then after that 4 weeks, I changed my methods again and strictly did negative behavior management. So I didn't change any colors to purple, I only did yellow, orange, and red. What I noticed during this 12 weeks of research is that all of my students were very different. Some students had a really hard time with me changing their colors. I had a couple that just cried hysterically, and a couple of them even became physically ill. And then there were other students who just didn't care. You could change their color and it made no difference to them, because this system relies heavily on parent support. And if the students aren't receiving any sort of punishment at home to back what we're doing at school, they don't care. While I was doing only positive behavior reinforcement, I noticed that a lot of my students' behavior had started to improve. There were some students who still had difficulty, just as they always had, but they were striving harder to get my attention. They wanted to receive the positive attention that the other students were getting. When I did only negative behavior redirection, it was more difficult. I had more problems with my students. Students who would normally not get in trouble were getting into trouble. And the students who usually did get into trouble were getting into even more. They just didn't care. In fact, one day I had a student tell me, "Well, I'm already on red, so what are you going to do?" And I realized that this system really doesn't work. When I was doing only the positive behavior reinforcement, it seemed to work so much better than the negative. And I noticed as well that some of my students became isolated because they were always into trouble, and the other students didn't want to be around them because they didn't want to get into trouble as well. So, what I found out through this whole process is that more research really needs to be done. It doesn't make sense that the whole state of Texas, most of the schools that I've been into use some form of these public behavior charts, but there's no research backing them. So there definitely needs to be more research, more extensive than what I was able to do. But at this point, I don't believe that these sorts of behavior charts should be used in a classroom. There's no research, and the research that has been done says that positive behavior reinforcement is always the way to go. It really builds students' self-esteem. It makes them want to do better. This is something that research has confirmed over and over again, and I think we need to focus more on that than on the negative behavior reinforcement, and not isolate our students by showing everyone who the good kids are and who the bad kids are. I hope you enjoy my research.